This episode brought to you by Discovery Bank. Ready to experience the future of banking now? Get on board. Discovery Bank Limited is an authorized FSP 48657. T's and C's apply. So, you think you want to be a CEO?
My very first job as CEO, at my very first board meeting, there was a request to invest another $100 million into the US business to make it work. I realized that actually throwing money at this was not going to be the solution. And so I said to my board, I'd rather have the $100 million to continue our European expansion, which actually meant that the US business went into Chapter 11.
The power, the status, the money.
If you don't understand yourself, you can't be a better leader. Because unless you know what you're good at, and I certainly learned a lot about what I wasn't good at from feedback.
Is it all it's cracked up to be?
I'm not going to change the world, but I can, through my money, through my convening power, I'm doing that to make this place a better world, and particularly for young people.
You probably haven't heard of Belron, but you definitely know its brand. Autoglass, Safelite, Carglass, PG Glass, 17 brands, 42 countries, 36,000 employees. The biggest automotive glass business in the world, with a likely stock market listing later on this year that could value the business at about $40 billion. All of it built on a single, fairly unglamorous product: glass. Mostly in windscreens, the parts of the car that you look at most but should be invisible to you as the driver. The company has its roots in South Africa, founded in Cape Town in 1897, and at various points in its 130-year history, 3 generations of the same family have run it. So it's not strictly a family business, but it's certainly a family story. The name Belron, well, also a family construct. When Ronnie Lubner globalized the group in the 1990s, the plan was to name it after his parents, Maury and Bella. More Bell, Belmore. Small problem, though. In French, where it intended to operate, both sounded uncomfortably close to bad deaf. So they tried again, and they landed on Belron, after Bella and her son Ronnie. Today's guest is Gary Lubner, the 3rd generation, the man who ran Belron for 22 years, grew its revenues 7-fold to 6 billion euros a year. But perhaps the detail that tells you most about him: in 2021, when the company hit a 21 billion euro valuation and the leadership team got a massive payout, Gary decided every employee should share on it, and he convinced his executives to do precisely that. So all 30,000 of them at the time, regardless of position, received 10,000 euros each in cash and shares. That was a distribution of 300 million euros across the workforce, making it one of the largest employee share distributions in corporate history. Gary is retired from Belron now. His new mission: to give away his fortune in his lifetime. So, what does it take to be a CEO?
I went in sort of as a slightly arrogant, smart MBA, and my first few years at Belron were around developing strategy. But I was then asked to go and run our UK business, which was called Autoglass, which was the most successful business. And I suppose that was my first CEO role. It was managing director. I wasn't CEO of the group. I was just managing director. And I guess that was one of my biggest learning experiences. So some of the things that I realized that I needed, and some of these things you kind of learn by doing, and I guess that's a big part of what it's like to be a CEO, is that you continue learning. I mean, up until the day I retired, nearly 35 years later, I was still learning every day. But I think the few things for me, and again, we have to contextualize the business. I wasn't running a tech business or a finance business. I was running a business which relied on people, real people, thousands of them, customers who actually never planned. No one wakes up in the morning and says, I'm really excited and I'm going to go and buy a windscreen.
Something traumatic has happened, whether it's a chip or whether you've had a brick through the window. It's unpleasant, yeah.
It's unplanned, it's traumatic, it's a hassle. And so, what I learned very quickly was that, firstly, you had to put yourself in the customer's shoes. So try and really understand what journey the customer was going on. And a huge part of that was, which really became an absolute passion of mine, was if you're expecting to solve that customer's problem, make sure that the people who are solving it are the best possible people. And so a big part of my job, even in my very first job at Autoglass, was making sure that I got out into the business and met every single person. So a good example was, this was in the days of cassette tapes. In my first week in Autoglass, I sat at my desk and I said, like we're doing now on a tape, I said every single person's name that was employed. There were at that time, about 1,500 people. And we then sent out a cassette tape. So we then spliced each person's name to my message, which was, hi, I'm Gary Lubner. I'm your new managing director. And this is, but I would have said, hi, Bruce, this is Gary Lubner. And we sent out this cassette tape to every single member of staff. And the impact that it had was quite extraordinary, because it actually said that I was interested, which I was, interested in them, interested in their views, and that I was a normal guy. The photo in the front was myself with my 2 kids at the time and my wife. And, I was just saying, look, I'm here to try and help us build an amazing business. So this idea of getting very close to the people, understanding people in a deep way. So not just asking them about their terms and conditions or things, but asking them about their families, asking them about the football teams that they supported, and actually building much stronger links, because then people felt much more comfortable to tell me, and they certainly did, what was going wrong or how we could improve. And the thing I learned then and continue to learn now is, when you listen to people, even if you don't give them the right answer, as long as you're listening and as long as they feel like you're genuinely listening, you can move a long, long way. I'm trying to answer your question. What does it take? I think it takes a lot of self-awareness. So I learned a lot about myself along the way. I made sure that we put in a proper management development program at Autoglass, which is around developing senior managers, which always starts with self-awareness, self-understanding. I'm an absolute firm believer that if you don't understand yourself, you can't be a better leader. Because unless you know what you're good at, and I certainly learned a lot about what I wasn't good at from feedback, then you support yourself in that way. So that was a big part. And I think that also helps build confidence, because, I would challenge any CEO in the world to tell me that they don't have, at some time, if not throughout their entire career, some sort of imposter syndrome. You sit there and you think, well, how the hell did I get into this role? People are looking at me, people are expecting things, expecting answers, expecting solutions. And bluntly, I don't have them all the time. And so you get this, sometimes some quite deep feelings of imposter syndrome, of why am I here? And the way around that is really to, I think, be very transparent, to say, I don't have all the answers. Let's try work on it together. But also to build your own confidence by, as I say, building on self-awareness.
It was a little bit unfair, I think, in some respects, simply to parachute you in at the helm of a business without you having, yes, you had the background, yes, you had the MBA, yes, you understood the business perfectly well, but you hadn't gone from managing a team of 5 to managing a team of 20 to 100, being a regional manager of 500. You get parachuted in to manage 1,500 people in a country that is not home, with systems and beliefs and a culture that is not yours. And I'm guessing that is why you have this obsession with management development, because you know what it's like to be chucked in the deep end with weights around your ankles.
Yeah, I think that's true. To be fair, I didn't really feel like I was chucked in. I mean, in South Africa, I had managed sort of nothing of this scale. You're absolutely right. But I had managed teams. I had thought about that a bit. But yes, this was a big, big step for me. I mean, I was still in my mid-30s. Certainly, I was less than 40. It was a big business. It was a well-known business in the UK. And yes, the fact that I wasn't from there, I talked differently. To be honest, I found that as a big advantage. People couldn't place me. They couldn't say, it didn't matter what school I'd gone to or anything like that. And so, I tried to be as as normal as possible. And yeah.
Game in England is to find a pigeonhole to slot you in, and then people know where you fit. And the class system is as alive and well today as it was in the days of Henry VIII. And when you do go in as an outsider, suddenly you're in a pigeonhole that says, we don't know what to do with you. And then it's up to your character, your personality, your behavior, whether or not you're trusted. That then allows them to say, okay, you're not one of us, but we can deal with you.
That's maybe a bit extreme, but I think that is right. I think not being able to pigeonhole me was in the end a big help. And as ever with these things, it's the things that bring people together. Sports is a huge leveler. And, I love all sports. And so, and being South African, you could always have a bit of a joke, whether it was rugby or cricket, football, we couldn't do that. But, I was a West Ham supporter and we had lots. I had lots of fun with particularly with the technicians around football and BG support.
Although you're the third generation of your family to be involved in the company Belron, it's not a traditional family business because your grandfather joined a business that was founded in the 1890s, and his first job was effectively, and I use the word smose, he was smosing glass from a wooden cart that he would, I think, drag around. I don't think he had a pony or a donkey to pull it. A barrow.
It's a barrow, that he used to push around selling to furniture makers and builders merchants, exactly.
In downtown Johannesburg. But the family that starts the original business likes him, and eventually he becomes chairman. And then unrelated to that, your dad becomes the head of the business in South Africa. And then unrelated to that, because by then there are lots of different shareholders and structures and things, you become the MD in the UK and later the CEO of a rapidly growing group, because you take a business which is well known in South Africa, well known in the UK, and you say there is an opportunity here to create something really massive. What was your thinking as you sat in the UK with these 1,500 reports to whom you were sending the cassettes? What was the trigger that said, actually, this can be from 1,500 people to 37,000 people by the time I leave one day?
Yeah, Bruce, I'm sure you've done enough of these things to have worked out it never works like that. It's never... Isn't there never some great epiphany that I'm sitting at a desk and thinking, I'm going to have this empire of people? I mean, that's just not the way it works. What was happening with the UK was the business that was actually the only profitable part of the business. Remember, Belron in those days was very small. It was actually owned, when I started there, it was owned by SAB Miller, because which was interesting at the time, and that was remembered pre-democracy days when SAB were a huge conglomerate and they just went into almost every kind of business, from hotels to matches to glass to furniture. So I was busy running this UK business, and my boss, the CEO, a guy by the name of John Mason, amazing guy, he was starting to get approached by people in other countries who had seen the success of what had happened in the UK. And, places like Belgium, Holland, Italy. And he had started either buying businesses or developing businesses. I was very happy in the UK. But because I was part of the exec team, I was hearing about some of these things going on in Europe. And I was always really interested in all of that kind of thing. And so I stayed at Autoglass, the UK business. I was MD there for, I think, about 5 years. And then John asked me to look after all of Europe. So that was all of continental Europe. And that was really an exciting time. And that was I did that for 3 or 4 years, where we grew our French business and our German business in particular. I mean, they were businesses, I remember, Germany was doing like 10 million euros a year. Today, it'll be close to 1 billion, similarly with France. And what I realized, and what we as a team realized, the process of breaking your glass is exactly the same all over the world. It's exactly the same process. So you break your glass, you don't know what to do. So you either call your insurance company, so you've got to have you've got to have relationships with insurance companies. You then get a technician who either comes out to you in their van, or you come to a branch. So you've got to have a branch network. You've got to have a set of mobile technicians. You've got to do the work, and you've got to do that well. You then got to charge the customer and so it goes. So the process was exactly the same. So we decided, well, let's try and expand our model, if you like, around the world. And I had particular responsibility for Europe. And we did that very, very successfully, as I said. And so then suddenly I was responsible now for 7 or 8 countries, growing rapidly, the business growing 20, 30, 40% a year in some places. And that brought all of its own challenges. And the biggest challenge always was, have you got the right people? Have you got the right team?
There are two main bits to it, aren't there? There's a massive logistics element, ensuring that you've got the right supply from the right place, getting to where you need it. And you need a Mercedes SLK, a bit of glass, or a Rolls-Royce piece, or a whatever the various models were. So huge stock to deal with. And then, of course, once somebody arrives agitated, traumatized, and not wanting to spend the money, a technician who's got sufficient EQ to just calm them down and make the experience as seamless as possible.
Exactly. Yeah. So you spot on. I learned quite early on, not right at the beginning, but I learned quite early on that our technicians, obviously they need to have some technical ability, but that wasn't the key thing when we were recruiting. What we were recruiting were for people who really liked people. And because that was, 2:00 in the morning when you've had your car broken into, the man, and I'm pleased to say increasingly now, or woman who arrives to fix the glass, that's your brand. That's your business. It doesn't matter about anything else. And so their ability to, exactly as you say, calm the person down, explain the process. This is how long it's going to take. This is what we're going to have to do. And if we haven't got the glass for you, we're going to make sure that your car's safe, etc. So much more about the people skills. The technical skills you could teach. I mean, those weren't difficult. I mean, you need to have obviously some sense of, I would never be able to be a technician because I can't even change a light bulb. But you've got to have some sort of technical dexterity, and you can teach that. You can make people into very good technicians. It's much harder to teach attitude, customer empathy, that sort of thing. And so we changed our whole model around recruitment to really find people who love people. That was the first criteria. And then once you did that, we could teach the rest.
From the start, the ambition was clear: to build a bank that could be more than a bank. One that rewards better decisions, connects the ecosystems that shape your life, and gets smarter the more you engage. That ambition is now a reality. With Discovery Bank, your entire financial life comes together in one intelligent platform, accessed through a single app. It understands your behavior, works harder for you over time, and helps you build your financial future with confidence. Discovery Bank, the future of banking. Now.
You get to the year 2000 and you're offered the job as CEO. By then, it's a considerably bigger business and growing quickly. When you take over, and I don't want to get the numbers wrong, what sort of turnover are you doing? How many staff are there in this rapidly growing business?
Yeah, so by the year 2000 now, SAB have sold their stake because they'd come to the UK and listed the business. So the ownership structure changed completely. The family, had a small shareholding, but it was very much a big business now owned primarily by a big Belgian listed group. So when I was asked to take over in 2000, the turnover would have been about 600 million. We probably would have had about 5,000 or 6,000 people. And we were so very strong in Europe, strong in Australia and New Zealand. Canada was reasonable. But we had a minority stake in a big US business, which was in real trouble, actually. And so I took over this business, which had quite a lot of turnover, but had this big US business, which was actually in serious trouble. And my very first job as CEO, at my very first board meeting, there was a request from the US business, from our US partners, to invest another $100 million into the US business to make it work. And because I did know the business really well and I'd gone over to the US and I'd met the team, I realized that actually throwing money at this was not going to be the solution. And so I said to my board, I'd rather have the 100 million to continue our European expansion, which actually meant that the US business went into Chapter 11. So it was a tough time. Now, we weren't in management control. We just were, we had about 40% of the business. So we weren't in management, and that, in a sense, was my problem, because I said to the board, look, if we can get in there and actually do the things that I know need to be done, then I would consider it. But if it's going to continue with the majority shareholder, which was a private equity company running it, then I'm out. And so, yeah, it was a tough time that. And anyway, they backed me, and it turns out, so the business went into liquidation, and then we can talk about 2007 when I went back into the US and bought the same business back out again, and the rest is history, as they say.
And one of the hardest things as CEO, because you are ultimately responsible for the creation of strategy, the implementation of strategy, and you have to make the tough calls. And you know the people who are coming to you and saying, really, please help, because we've got these other guys who, don't understand us. You understand us. Together we can make this work. And you have to draw a line in the sand. Is that a decision that kept you awake at night for a week or two? Or was it quite easy for you as an accountant to go, it makes no sense, therefore, sorry, but we have to cut you loose?
I was never a very good accountant, by the way. I was one, but it's because I'm probably less rational than sometimes we should be. But Bruce, you absolutely spot on there. I was having the management team in the US who I knew vaguely. I mean, it turns out that, the guy who was sales director at the time became the CEO when I got back in. So I knew them, and they were saying, we can see what Belron is doing around the world. We really would love you guys to get more involved. And I said, well, look, the only way I can get involved is if we have control of the business, or if your private equity partners allow us to do that. And they just clearly are not interested in learning from what we've done around the world. So in that sense, it was easy, but I did feel like I was letting people down, and the business went into bankruptcy.
And one of the critical things of leadership is you have to have a level of comfort without being psychopathic about it, but you have to have a level of comfort with letting people down, because there is a greater whole that has to be grown and preserved. There are better options than this right now. You have to be that person who can, with a clear conscience, make those calls that will affect real people in their lives.
Absolutely right. Yeah. And those were always the decisions that were the toughest, the ones that affected people, the ones that I knew were going to have an impact on people's lives. I think I'm very fortunate in my business career that those were few and far between. I mean, there were always times when we just had to do some of that. But I'm very proud that, from those sort of 5,000 or 6,000, today we employ 35,000. So in a strange way, sometimes I think, well, I know it's been tough on a lot of people, but also, we've given employment. And when I think of numbers of people, I always think, I times it by 3 or 4, because they've always got 3 or 4 dependents. And so, when someone's losing a job, you do really take that, because that it's not just going to be affecting one person; it's going to be affecting a family. And similarly, when you create a good thing, it's good as well.
You grow it then from that sort of 600 million euros in turnover with 5,000 staff to, by the time you retire, about 36 or 37,000 people to 6 and then quickly 7 billion euros in turnover. That is a growth rate that is not quite tech stock growth rate, but it is a magnificent amplification of a business model. And once, I suppose, you had the model right, you could just simply apply it in country after country because of the similarities referred to earlier.
Well, that's exactly right. Now, the one number you haven't mentioned, which I think is probably the even more impressive one, is the profit number. So in my first year as CEO, we were making a profit of about 47 million euros in 2000 EBITDA. When I left, it was over 1 billion EBITDA. And that's obviously where the value of the business comes from, is what sort of cash flows you're generating and what sort of profit. Having said that, I never, ever focused only on the profit number. My thing was always, if you look after your people, you look after your customers, you look after the society that you're from, whether that's giving back to local communities, environment, all of that. If you do all of those things really, really well, and I mean really well, world class, then the numbers kind of come out of that. The numbers have always, for me, been an outcome, never a purpose, never a target, never. It's just been, I focus on the things that I can have an influence on, which is how do we treat our customers, our people, our society, and then I hope that the numbers come through.
Now, okay, everybody says that. We look after our people. Our people are our biggest asset. Our most valuable asset goes up and downstairs in the lift every day. Blah, blah, bull dust, bull dust, bull dust, bull dust. It's often ruthless and shameless in terms of, economy's down a bit. Let's blame it on AI and fire 10,000 people. There is, however, a little birdie did drop in my ear. There was a moment toward the end of your tenure where you were able, and your senior leaders within Belron were able to realize, I think, a generous payment for the work that you'd done in the business that you'd built. And I don't think you forced, but I think you might have encouraged your senior leaders to do something fairly unusual.
Yeah. I mean, which is, in a sense, after I'd done what I'm about to describe, was sort of the time when I said, you know what, it doesn't get better than this. It's time for me to think about stepping down. So yes, I was very conscious throughout my career that the people doing the work on the ground were really, unsung heroes. They were often doing things where no one was watching, where, you were delivering outstanding service. And so there's always something niggling at me, which is how do we really reward people? Now, obviously, we pay them well, we give them bonus. At the end of 21, where we got our second lot of private equity investors into the business, our first lot had come in 2017, and they'd put in a management incentive program together with me. We designed it, and the private equity guys were very comfortable with that, which meant that effectively, if they did really well, the management did very well on steroids, if you like. So it's a classic sort of sweet equity type of deal. And we got to the end of 21, the original private equity guys, CD&R, sold a stake to another set of big investors. And so that crystallized quite a big chunk of our management incentive. Now, because the business had done so extraordinarily well over the period, even from the big growth in Belron has been from 2015, 2016 up until now. I discovered that we had become, in my view, obscenely wealthy because of the thing. And I must say, I felt very uncomfortable with that. When I announced to our senior management, and that was about 250 people, that the amounts of money that were going to be coming our way, people were just, literally gobsmacked, in tears, many of them. It was just quite extraordinary. I'd like to give you some examples, but I probably can't. But I felt very strongly that actually here was an opportunity to do something for all of our people. And I came up with this idea, which was called the Belron Thank You. And I went to the senior team and I said, listen, guys, we have done unbelievably well. How about if you give up some of what which is way beyond the expectations I'd ever set for them. And we give that to, at the time, it was 27,000 people. The reason it was 27,000, we said you've got to have been working for Belron for 6 months. And so when you took off people who hadn't been there for 6 months, it was down to about 27,000. And we gave each and every person the equivalent of 10,000 euros, 1,500 euros of cash and 8,500 euros of shares in the company with no conditions. So you didn't have to stay. You could leave the next day and take your 10,000, or you could stay and sell your shares at some later stage or anything in between. We called it the Belron Thank You. I announced it to every country. I did either a video cast or I went into the countries and we announced this thing that each of you are going to be getting 10,000 euros. Now, the impact of that was incredible. It ended up costing, you can work out the maths yourself, 270 million euros, which was 27,000 times 10,000. And that was a gift, if you like, from us as the senior leadership. And back to your point, when we said people are important, well, this was one way of saying, actually, you are important. We're thanking you. We're not trying to bribe you or say we're giving you this and therefore you must stay in the company. No, this is a thank you. It's a thank you for the past. And so it goes on.
How then do you exit? Because you've now got this deeply intimate relationship with certainly your senior management team. You can't possibly know every one of the 35,000 and you're not sending cassette tapes out to them anymore. So that relationship is different now. But you get to a point where you go, there's other stuff I want to do. I want to take the money I've earned and give it away, and we'll go there in a second. But how do you choose your successor, and how does that play out?
Yeah. So, firstly, when is it time to go? Yes, that's a very personal thing. For me, it was a combination of a few things. It was a combination of my age. So in 2021, when I made the decision that I was going to leave and give the board sort of 18 months to find a successor, I was already 63 years old. A second thing was I wanted to think about what I was going to do in the next phase of my life. I had all this money, feeling actually quite uncomfortable about it. My kids were feeling uncomfortable about it. They didn't want to inherit, millions. And so we had a really good chat. And so what became really key for me was this was going to be an exciting next chapter. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And so obviously then, yes, the question is, who's the successor? And that was a trickier one because I had honestly the most brilliant team at Belron. I mean, each one of them absolutely outstanding, world class. But the business was moving on and moving into a phase where it was going to be listed because it continued to be a private company. The size of the business had become so huge that a listing was inevitable. And so we knew that the next CEO would be someone who would take the company public, which bluntly requires a whole set of new skills that I didn't have and frankly didn't want to get either. The thought of being a publicly listed company CEO didn't hold many attractions to me. We left ourselves with enough time and then we went off. I knew and my team were not keen to take over as CEO. And so we decided to go externally, which is then what we did.
You chose, and he had to convince you to choose him, the guy who did the SAB Miller AB InBev deal, another Belgian company which bought SAB, a guy called Carlos Brito, tough-nosed, private equity guy, a fundamentally different character to you, different style to you. What gave you the comfort that this business that you nurtured would be in safe hands?
It's so interesting because the way you've described him is exactly the way I thought. I'd read the same things I'd heard. And I know that Brito won't mind me telling the story that when I first met him, I remember we met at Heathrow Airport and I stood in the doorway and said to him, I'm really not sure why we're meeting. Brito, you've been incredibly successful, but Belron's a very different kind of a business. It's a business built on people and on customer. With the greatest respect, I'm not sure that this is a good match. And he just said to me, Gary, please just sit down. And what became absolutely apparent and is apparent today is, I have so many shared values with him. The way that he thinks about life, the way that he thinks about people, the way that he thinks about customers. There are much, much more similarities between the two of us than there are differences. He's an engineer, and so he's much better at sort of the operational, and he loves getting stuck into the real operational kind of stuff. But he's somebody who's out in the business all of the time, exactly the way that I was, talking to people, talking to the technicians. He's got vast experience of being in a huge publicly listed company. And honestly, the stories, the myths around him, he had some tough decisions to make at AB InBev. He would admit that there were things that didn't go exactly the way that he went. But honestly, I couldn't be happier with the way that he's turned out and he's carrying on the legacy. It's going to be different though. This business is our, the IPO value is, you can read in the Financial Times the sort of estimates of what that might be. I can't really comment, but it's huge. It's going to be one of the biggest listings, certainly in the year. And yeah, so it's going to need a different approach.
Do you still have a shareholding?
I do. Yeah.
So that's going to make your problem even bigger. This gross embarrassment you feel, this agony of all of this money. And you actually have, I'm being facetious, of course, but you have set up, and for years you have been giving money away. Africa Ticon has benefited hugely from your largesse. You've done work in South Africa, in the United Kingdom. So you're the home of origin, your adopted home. You have given money, and you're listed as probably the biggest, maybe one of the biggest donors to the Labour Party. A figure of £4.5 million was there. I have to ask you, and this will date because the story is moving at the time we speak really, really quickly. Is it the one donation you regret in your life, handing money to a political party that feels like it's at war with itself?
Absolutely not. Just to give you some context. So yes, you're right. So my foundation that I set up just, 4 years ago called This Day. And it's called This Day because we want to do something today. I'm not one of these foundations who just sort of keeps accumulating and sending off the next year. I want to, mine's what's going to be called a spend down foundation. So I want to try and give away as much of my money. And certainly I've committed 95% of that. Ideally, I'd like to give it away while I'm still here because I get joy from giving. There's so much need that I don't see any reason why we should be waiting and saving to give it at a later stage. There'll be many more philanthropists and many more multi-million and billionaires who are able to do that. So I want to do it now. And as you said, my big focus is South Africa. 60 to 70% is in South Africa. I can tell you in the 3 or 4 years that we've been going, we've donated to a number of different organizations, well over R1 billion already, and that will continue to grow. And here in the UK, and by the way, in South Africa, we work very closely in a number of areas with government as well, because philanthropists cannot solve the world's problems. The world's problems are solved by governments and by states. And so that doesn't mean you just sort of recklessly give money to, and that's not what we do. One of my favorite stories is that we're part of a group that funds young PhD, brilliant women in the Department of Basic Education who help the minister come up with policies, come up with the right things by looking at what's going on around the world. And that allows proper decisions to be made at a government level, which then has a huge impact. And in South Africa, there's something called Bana Pele, which is a new early childhood initiative. The president announced last February an additional 10 billion rand going into early childhood development. I like to think that we were part of getting to that kind of thing. So, charity and giving away comes in many, many different forms. And to your point about the Labour Party, 3 or 4 years ago, I was so disillusioned with the Tory party who had taken this country firstly into Brexit, had then gone through a shocking COVID, lots of corruption, I don't have to repeat all of the stuff that went on. But I felt very strongly if I wanted a better society and a better country, actually, if I could help change the government, that would have a much bigger impact than any of the millions that I would give away to just local charities. And that's what I did. And by the way, it's what I believe today. So, I'm not one of these people who think that giving money, then they've got to do everything perfectly. And that unless they do, I'm withdrawing it. I'm in this, and it's the same with my philanthropy. Life is not a straight line. Everything doesn't work at the same time. And by the way, that includes government. But do I think the Labour government and the Labour Party is the right party to get a prosperous UK? I absolutely do. And so I'm going to, not only do I not regret the support, I'm going to continue supporting them quite unashamedly. And the ship that I get for, you can imagine, is unbelievable here in the UK. But I don't care. That's a good thing about getting old.
A number of people would say the only reason why philanthropists give money to governments or to political parties is so they can take a trip to Buckingham Palace or to Windsor Castle or St. James's Palace, kneel on a cushion and get tapped on the shoulder with a sword and be called Sir Gary. Is that part of your ambition?
It's absolutely not part of my ambition. I'm on the record. So the truth is, the way it works here is a lot of political donors get put into the Lords, which is, so you become a Lord. I'm on the record that I do not want to be a Lord, and if I was offered that, I would turn it down. So no, I'm not looking to be ennobled or to go into the House of Lords. Other honors are beyond me, and that's not why I'm doing it. It's got nothing to do, and certainly not to do with politics or anything like that. So no. The good thing, I think, and I certainly hear that from a lot of the people that I give to, and it's both in the charity and the political sense, is my gifts are pretty much unconditional. I don't give and then expect something back. I give and I expect the world to become a better place, one way or another. And I'm afraid that's my only thing, which enables me, and it takes a lot of stress off. It enables me to look at things in the long term, give multi-year grants, give proper support, and that's part of what I'm trying to do.
What does it mean then, as you look back on what you've achieved? What does it mean to be a CEO? What's the power of it? What's the real power of being a CEO?
The real power is using your position, firstly, wisely and humbly, very importantly, but then I think also using it to create change. And creating change, the world is constantly in flux and constantly needs change. And that's down to one of our branches in any country that you choose, to the whole of Belron. It was an organization that continues to evolve, even though we do exactly the same thing and are very focused. You continually evolve, and being in the lucky position of being a CEO where you can actually change direction, set direction, make sure that people are coming along with you is a hugely privileged position and a hugely powerful thing. And I think similarly, I see myself the same role now in philanthropy. I'm not going to change the world, but I can, through my money, through my convening power. I mean, the amount of people now that I've met and can call on is massive. But I'm doing that to make this place, a better world, and particularly for young people, which is why most of our focus is around, early childhood, as I said in SA, youth unemployment in SA, which is an absolute crisis, but we've got to lean into that. And similarly here in the UK, working in local communities around community cohesion, keeping the extremists at bay. And all of that is linked into politics by definition. So you might not agree with my politics, but I hope you can agree with wanting to make this place a better place for our kids and our grandkids.
Is there ever a moment where you go, I wish I'd stepped down from being a CEO a year, 5 years, 10 years earlier, and had begun the process of philanthropy earlier? I don't think you regret anything, but if there was a regret, might it be that?
It would be an easy thing to say, yes, it would. But, honestly, I loved my job. I mean, until the day that I left, I loved every single day at work. So, no. So I was, when I decided to go, I was ready to go. I mean, the easy answer would be to say, because I'm loving what I'm doing now, by the way. I'm absolutely loving it. And I'm bloody getting old. So, would I have liked another 10 years to be doing what I'm doing? Absolutely. But you can't have everything. So I'm going to answer no. I don't regret stepping down when I did, and I don't regret that I did it, that I should have done it earlier.
If the money outlasts you, have your kids got clear instructions as to what to keep doing with it?
Not really, because, what I don't want to do is burden my kids. So all three of them are amazing, and they are all doing work, if you like, for the public good. And so I'm totally comfortable that they'll be okay. After my death, if there is still money left, we will make sure that that's rapidly, spent down. And if, they're young, they're in their 30s, my youngest is in his 20s. If, as time goes on, they decide to get involved in my foundation, it would be an absolute joy and a delight. But if not, that's not a problem for me either. They're very involved. They know what we're doing. They're totally engaged. But I want them to get on and do their own thing.
It's stressful to earn it. It's even more stressful to give it away. Gary Lubner carrying forward a legacy of leadership and of creation and of building the biggest automotive glass business in the world. Gary Lubner, the Chief Executive of Belron. This episode of So You Think You Want to Be a CEO is powered by Discovery Bank. Discovery Bank is an authorized FSP 48657. T's and C's apply.